Hello and welcome to this video tutorial. Today we're going to be covering procedural animation. Yep, procedural animation. That is animation that is driven by the procedural editor, so you can throw in things like functions, and it's pretty cool. It's one of my favorite things to use. We're going to be animating a vehicle, but you might be able to guess that animating a vehicle is fairly simple. I mean, you just spin the tires around and the thing goes forwards. Tires rotate, the whole car just moves in one direction, and that's pretty straightforward. So I figure I'm going to change it up a bit, and we're going to be doing square wheels. Because I watched an episode of Mythbusters and they had square wheels, and it was funny. So I watched that and I thought, wow, that's a lot of interesting physics going on there. I wonder how I would animate that. And as it turns out, there are several ways that you might try to animate it, but I tried them and they failed. Because here, let's put a dot right in the middle. Suppose that is the center point. Oh, you can barely see that. When the wheel turns, because every point on the circle is equally distant from the center, it's a smooth ride. But when you have a center point here, and this thing rotates where this corner has to come up, pivoting on this corner, the center has to go up and then down, and then up and then down, and up and down. And it makes for interesting problem to solve, and I did this while I had some spares at school today, and it was really cool. So I'm going to split this into two videos. The first one is going to be the failures, because you have to kind of understand that before you realize why you go to the extreme of using functions. And so I'm going to take you through the stuff I tried and the things I learned. So first of all, I'm going to turn on the snap to grid, just one subdivision, because I just want a square that is, well, that's weird, but whatever. That's perfectly 1 by 1 by 1. Turn snap to grid off. Put it somewhere around there, I guess 4.5 and 0.5. I like to have everything aligned to grid, especially for this. So, first of all, let's say this x-axis is our ground, and we want it to pivot on this point, which is pretty simple to do. If we change this to a triangle mesh, then we can actually double click on it and edit the individual points. And if we click this button here, we'll notice that Art of Illusion has said the center of this object is, what do you know, the center of this object? Well, we want the center of the object to be this point. And since we know these are 1 unit, this is a 1 unit grid, and we know this is 1 unit wide, it's pretty straightforward. Select everything, grab our gizmo tool. Holding down shift snaps to, what does that snap to? It snaps to the 0.1 unit. So it's very easy to align this like so. And now the center is these points right here. So we're going to hit OK. And of course this moved. So we're going to want to move this back. That's now going to be 0 because this point is 0 on the vertical. And this is going to be 4. There we go. And now we're going to want to keyframe this. So we're going to bring up the score here. Animation, keyframe, modify tracks and selected objects. I don't have any modifications, but if it detects there's no keyframes, it'll put a keyframe where your marker is. So that is pretty straightforward. And let's say it's going to drop 90 degrees every second, just for easy math. So we're going to go over to 1 second, click our gizmo, and look at that. It pivots around the right point, and we're going to hold down shift. That snaps to 5-degree increments. and we're going to sit right there. Now we can also modify keyframe. And we hit play, and what do you know, it works great. However, we try doing this again, and of course, it pivots around the same point, still pivoting around its center. We want to change the center, which actually I don't think you can do. So, how are we going to do this? Well, this is a square, and it's symmetrical, so here's, just bear with me for a second here. I'm going to keyframe the position, grab these two, move them back by 1 frame. Now we're going to select both channels and keyframe again. So now it finishes its rotation 1 frame sooner, which is no big deal, you can't even tell. But what we're going to do between these 2 frames is we're going to move and rotate the cube appropriately to put it in the same spot with this point over here. So here's what it's going to look like. We're going to remember this is our point of interest. So we're putting that point of interest right there, and then we're rotating this back. And we're going to keyframe those. So now it falls, and really there's no difference, like you can't even tell something happened. But we can continue to rotate this again, and now we can keyframe it. And you have a rotating cube, which kind of works. However, it's going to be very manual and tedious to make all these keyframes. And right here we are cheating by doing some manipulation in 0 frames. And if you have a texture applied to this that isn't necessarily symmetrical, you're going to notice the texture suddenly alter orientation, and so that's not good. So that was my first attempt, and that failed, so we're going to delete this object. We're going to try again. Let's put another cube. And I will go down here, make sure it's 1 by 1 by 1. That's a lot easier than snapping to grid. Okay, so now instead of rotating around this point, we're going to try rotating around the center, because that's a default and it might work out better. So let's keyframe this, move ahead, and we say, where do we want this cube to be, or what position do we want it to be in 1 second? Well, that's pretty simple. We're going to move this over by 1, and then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Going to keyframe this, and we can see that it kind of does what we want. It's a nice smooth transition. The only problem is when it's right in the center at 0.5 seconds, it of course has to be raised up a bit. So I mean, this is all done by eye. Bring it up like so, keyframe, and there you go. You might notice down here at the bottom it's not perfect. It's because it's doing some smoothing on the animation. If we double click on these tracks, we'll see the smoothing method is interpolating, and that's the appropriate one to use for this kind of animation. But it's taking the position at this point, which is right where the gizmo is, and then at this point, and then again at this point, and it's smoothing between them, and it just so happens that that smoothing isn't exactly the trajectory the object would take. So it's not, mathematically perfect. So you end up with this kind of little bit off kilter there. But I mean, if you're animating a vehicle, it's going to go fast. And really, when it's going fast, can you even tell? So that works. It's better than the first method. But again, you're going to have to manually make all these keyframes. And you might try selecting and copying and pasting a bunch, but then it's going to go from here, it's going to rotate and the next frame is going to pop right back to here, and it's going to do this again. So you're going to have to select every group and move it all over, and it's tedious and manual, and I don't like doing that. I like automated stuff. So those are the two methods I thought of that failed before I succeeded. So yeah, stay tuned for the next video where we do some cool stuff with functions.